Thank you very much, Chair, distinguished delegates and representatives, ladies and gentlemen. I think we had a very good link into the general discussions through the keynote address by Professor Kanwar. And I just want to start with the most important point, I think, that we need to recognize, and that is that there have been really breathtaking developments in ICT. And these developments are accelerating. It's not like we've had them and they're going to slow down. And they have become a bit like our central nervous system. They do now influence nearly everything we can do. And I mean it seriously when I say they are linked into our very existence. They certainly condition how competitive we can be in the very open and knowledge-centered world, and they determine our future in a very significant way. So it's not something that you can opt out of. And the Pacific, which is already disadvantaged in so many ways, cannot really be opting out of the tremendous opportunities that are in the ICT developments, and nor can it be slow about it. So one of the things about ICT by definition is these are very rapid changes. And when you are behind and trying to catch up with the rest of the world, then you need to accelerate in order to have a decent chance of what we all envisage, which is that we want to link up with the world system with some dignity, with jobs that pay our citizens well. And ICT presents such a major opportunity for the Pacific to overcome all its major handicaps. So you're not limited by small markets because your market is around the world, and all you need to see is how small hotels are marketing themselves in very effective ways and reaching potential clients everywhere. Now these have significant opportunities for education, which is why this afternoon session is very important. Now we heard already that at the meeting in Vanuatu, the framework for ICT in education was approved, and that provides the overarching regional guidelines. And I think this afternoon you will see that there have been some interesting developments. But the overriding message that I want to leave with everybody is that it is not fast enough. It's not deep enough. And it's very uneven. And I think if you listen to the presentations and you read the literature, you'll be very aware of how true that is. So we need to accelerate progress, and we need to link it in very demonstrable ways to improvements in access and improvements in educational outcomes, the things that we have been talking about. And therefore, in my view, there is no alternative but to think more seriously about ICT in all the complexity, and of course to follow the advice, go and do it, because we can do it.
Thank you.
Now what I want to do is, I know the individual presentations will be looking deeply at various things. So my role this afternoon is to stretch it a little bit, to look at it from the top and see what is happening. I want to identify the major connectivity developments that have happened in the region that promise to change the ICT landscape dramatically in ways that 2 years ago we did not think feasible. And then I want to focus very much on, having seen it for a while, having read a little bit, what can we focus on which will give us the speed and the effect that we're looking at. So, this afternoon we will concentrate on certain things. This is not a comprehensive diagram, and they are out of shape because I was trying to compose some of them earlier. But what it does, it shows you that there are multiple dimensions of this whole issue. So clearly, we have the teachers, and we focused on teacher training, but we've not talked about the students. So we need to talk about them. And the fact is that the students are kilometers ahead of teachers. And we need to look at how to facilitate their learning without letting the teachers drag them down from what they're capable of. And I think this is a real challenge in the Pacific. We have some issues around connectivity, and the fact is that until the Pacific gets decent connectivity, no matter how bright you are and what you can dream of, the fact is you'll be constrained in your competing with those countries where connectivity is just taken for granted. Okay. We've referred to, Professor Kanwar referred to open educational resources. We need to look at systems and software that will allow all of that. So this is just to indicate that you can't just focus on one thing and expect to have success. Now, this is the only bit that relates to USP. The rest doesn't relate to USP. I've made sure of that. But I do want to say that at USP we recognize just how central ICTs are going to be, both in organizational terms for learning and teaching, our organizational effectiveness in our ability to monitor what we do and to report effectively, but more for what it means for the rest of the Pacific. And our role as the regional mandated agency now for ICT to be able to advocate more for it, to link with the countries and to facilitate in a sense of partnership. So the other theme I think that should come out of this is that we'll all achieve more if we recognize that the 21st century is a century of collaboration and networking and partnerships. And if we take those seriously, I think all of us will get more and will achieve more than if we try to feel we know the answer, we can do it. Because working together will do far more. Yeah. We also thought that part of the responsibility of the university is to broadly provide more sustainable and innovative solutions, particularly in relation to the huge investments that development partners and our governments have made in this area, where we feel we have a comparative advantage. Okay, so sorry, that was I said one, unfortunately there's another one, and this is just to say that probably the most effective innovative use of ICT for education is USPNet. And I've spoken at conferences, I've seen what the Caribbean does. We were at Peter with the University of Hawaii people, and they all admire the fact that in constrained connectivity, USP managed to do all of those. And the exciting thing is that connectivity is now improving, so imagine what more can be done. Okay, just a couple of slides to show. I'm going to constantly say that we are lagging behind other regions, and Professor Kanwar showed some figures. We are, of course, well behind others, but if you take the Asia out, then you see how far down we are. So we've got a lot of catching up to do. This data, which is more specific to the Pacific, shows just how far behind we are, whether we look at fixed broadband subscriptions or you look at the percentage of households with internet. We have a long way to go, and that is where the national policies around improving connectivity are vital. Because as I said, you have a bright idea, if you can't implement it, it's wasted. Now, against that background, there have been really very rapid and somewhat unexpectedly fast deployment of fiber. So Tonga has fiber, Vanuatu has fiber. Solomon Islands and Samoa are actively negotiating, and the general feeling is that within 18 months to 2 years, they'll have fiber. Countries in the north have had fiber, thanks to the American military. And countries like Kiribati, Tuvalu, Cook Islands, they're all also exploring fiber options. They prefer to have fiber, but they're all grappling with the issue of cost and benefits. And congratulations to Cook Islands. It's the first country in the Pacific to successfully deploy O3B. And I've had 2 meetings with the telecom here, just trying to understand what possibilities there are around O3B. And the general feeling from the telecom people anyway is that it's delivered on all the expectations, and they're very pleased with it. And subject to some more work, I think that O3B adds another tool in the connectivity issue. It's definitely much cheaper than C-band or Ku-band, and its latency, which is the slight delay in the signal, is as close, fairly close to fiber. So that makes people like us a lot more hopeful that significant opportunities for improvement are there. So what must we guard against, or what must we address? Well, first is, I think, we need to be dissatisfied with the speed with which we do. It may be okay in some fields, but in ICT, lack of speed is a killer. Because the rest of the people are moving ahead and moving ahead. And every day you delay it, there's an opportunity cost, because you could have solved your problem much faster, and a lot more benefits would have come to you. We need to be much more aware of exactly how we can leverage technologies, and particularly to understand just how much capacity is coming in. Very few people have an idea of just how much capacity opens up when you have fiber. Now, we've been working very closely with Marshall Islands, and we have bought 100 megabit connection. We have got an agreement nearly signed with Tonga, and we are in the final phases of negotiations with Vanuatu. Now, I'll give you the Vanuatu experience of just showing what can happen. Now, in Vanuatu, the cable company came in and said to the government, and I'm off the record now, said to the government, we'll give you STM1. Okay? So the government felt quite happy. We got STM1. So we sent 2 people to Vanuatu last week, and we began to talk to them. And we asked the question, why should the government have STM1? And why would you be happy about getting STM1? It's only 155 megabit. USB's capacity is 622 megabit. And we are going to go to STM16 to 2.5 gigabit connection. So why should a government for whom this is the national resource be satisfied with 155 megabit? So the government said, yeah, that's a good idea. So they are planning to take a paper to the cabinet, get legislation done to get a pair, so that they have enough for government, for e-government, for health, for education. And they have agreed with us that we can jointly manage it. And we work not only to support the campus there, but equally support the government, e-government, education in particular, and e-health initiative. The only reason I'm pointing out is that the government needs to be more assertive and aware of what they're giving away. And I think that if you become satisfied with the small pie that somebody gives you, you are sacrificing your future. Benefit from sharing experience, this is already happening. I think that governments need to establish national education networks. SchoolNet is happening in Samoa, and we need to make sure that every country that is serious about using IT for education should link all the schools into a national network. And I'll talk a little bit about a regional network later. And to give priority to open education resources. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And a great deal of our education is portable, particularly in science, in technology. And we should have the ability to tailor it to our needs, but we don't have to write everything. And textbooks, significant scope for improving the cost effectiveness of education in this way. Teacher training is essential. As I said, the teacher can become a drag because they'll try and bring the students down to the level they are comfortable with. Whereas the teachers are supposed to push the students beyond their capacities. So teacher training, making teachers more comfortable and confident is very important. Also want to say that if something is so important to your future, we can't just leave it to development partner support. If it is that important, then I think governments should put their own resources to the extent they can and form that partnership with development agencies. Otherwise, we can get into a situation where core functions may not happen if you don't get aid money. And that's not the way to build a solid future. We also need to understand that although I've been talking about having connectivity as a basic requirement, it's no longer the main issue. The main issue is what do you do with this connectivity? So we need to concentrate on the activities that we want to do, and that brings us to the question of content and the question of pedagogy. Now in theory, using ICT can provide very active, very engaging, very interactive education. Far more interesting and in the long term useful than face-to-face teaching. But we need to get there with our systems and concentration on new ways of learning and teaching. The world has moved, it's a question that I will ask a bit after this. The developments in computing have basically moved away from computers. In the past, when we mentioned ICT, it was about computers. It's not about computers anymore. It's about devices now. And it's about laptops. It's essentially about mobile devices. And we need to shift our thinking. And it's just an example of how we began to experiment with that. Now, this is not something that I want to see happen, but I think that in the context of huge development since the OLPC was thought as the way forward, we need to ask the question whether you want to go that route or leapfrog to where the world has already gone. And I take a disinterested view of that, but I think the question is very important to ask. Now just to show how, because I can see two slides. So I will not repeat that. Development of mobile devices means that the greatest and cutting edge developments are happening in what is generally called M-learning. That's learning on devices that you can take anywhere, and increasingly on your mobile phones and smartphones. And just to demonstrate that, you see that if you look at 2001 and 2013 period, the most significant advance has been in mobile connection. And if there is one area where the Pacific is reaching some of the levels and bridging that gap with the rest of the world, it is in mobile telephony. The other interesting thing is that when you look at the broadband now, fixed line broadband is around 10% of the inhabitants, whereas the biggest shift has occurred in broadband from mobile devices. So you got that 10% as opposed to almost 30%. And that is going to keep on happening, which means that whether we are talking about education or e-government or whatever, we need to be aware where the world is going. We don't want to follow it. In many ways we will follow it, but certainly want to follow it very quickly. Open education resources. I think I'm towards the end of it, but if you give me some indication of how many minutes I have, then I'll... 5. Okay. So open education resources. I can't overemphasize the problem of legacy. Everybody wants to do things in the way we have done it. So there's a lot of change that we need to bring. And open education resources are already available. They are demonstrating great success, and we need to make sure that we prevent our systems from not using open education resources or provide incentives to make sure that we are providing, utilizing open education resources. And we can do many things in terms of regional portals. There are, even if you don't have portals, you can access them from Khan Academy and a whole range of other portals. SchoolNets, I just want to lend my support to the work that has been done in Samoa and what I think could be done with everybody else. Now, this bit, I just want to alert you to something. The idea is that no region and no society makes great progress in a knowledge-centered world without these academic broadbands, whether they are national broadbands or whether they are regional broadbands. In most cases, they are all these things. No country has ever succeeded. And there's no reason to think that we are different enough to be the only people in the world to succeed without doing what everybody else has had to do. So here I'm advocating for national education and research networks, and to some extent they are developing. But I'm also suggesting that there is a need for a regional education and research network that will work in partnership with national networks, and as with other regional services, provide support and link with the other regional networks that exist everywhere, including the Caribbean. Even the Caribbean has a Caribbean knowledge network. We are the only one that is left behind. So the ICT countries commissioned a report. There was a meeting in Samoa, and we have put that as a potential thing that if there was interest among countries, that it could be funded under the European EDF 11 tranche of funding. But I also want to say that in 2012, here at the forum, the Australian Prime Minister did announce an initiative for academic broadband, so there is interest from Australia in that, and I know that ADB and the World Bank have been interested. So there is that possibility, and I think that this is the last slide. So prompt and effective use of ICT has been recognized by the ministers and yourself, but we just need to make sure that we are confident that we are moving fast enough. We are lagging behind, whatever the indicators are, There are pockets of excellence, and so the session this afternoon is a very good way of just sharing that and avoiding mistakes. So this is an area where lots of mistakes can be made. And finally, I would say there's a great deal of hope and scope for good educational broadband, for portals that make that knowledge available, for open educational resources. And from where I stand, I think the most exciting phase of ICT in education has begun. Thank you very much.